This program deals with themes of an adult nature and is intended for a mature audience.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings.
Our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world.
We must guard against the military-industrial complex.
You want answers? I think I'm entitled. You want answers? I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
The questions you always had. The answers you were never given. The place to seek the truth. Welcome to Veritas.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!
The power they took from the people will return to the people.
The Matrix is everywhere. It is all around us. It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth.
Shall I tell you what I find beautiful about you? You are at your very best when things are worse.
Sooner or later, though, you always have to wake up.
Be skeptical, but don't close your mind.
Greetings to everyone around the world, and a warm welcome to another edition of Veritas at veritasradio.com. I'm your host, Mel Fabregas, and I sincerely thank you for joining me once again. And if this is your first time, please make yourself at home. As always, I want to thank you, Veritas member, for making our truth journey a reality. Please subscribe at veritasradio.com to listen to all segments of tonight's interview and all of our material. When you subscribe, you receive your login immediately. And don't forget, Sanitas Radio begins on Tuesday, October the 1st. Check out the upcoming guests. You can subscribe at sanitasradio.com. Don't miss out as we embark on a new journey to declassify the secrets to our health and longevity, focusing on mind, body, and spirit, which is so necessary during these chaotic times. I hope you can join me. And for MMS, our futuristic metal-cased USB drives with all our seasons and bonus material, and phytovitamins feel the difference. Visit the Veritas store and also the sponsors page. To get in touch with us for member support, media inquiries, you want to be a guest or are a whistleblower, there's a link for you by clicking on the contact button of our website at veritasradio.com. There have been many truth seekers who paid the ultimate price for seeking and telling their truth, and were important enough for me to embark on this journey we call Veritas. One was William Cooper. The other one was Philip Schneider. For a very long time, I wanted to produce a show on the mysterious life and death of Phil Schneider. And tonight, we are doing so with a special guest, Darcy Weir, right now on Veritas. Darcy Weir has a university degree in sociology and a diploma in film production. Darcy is an independent researcher who found Phil Schneider's story to be very interesting and compelling. Through his investigation, he was able to contact Cynthia Schneider, Phil's ex-wife. Once he realized there was so much behind this man's story, he decided to collaborate with other researchers who could lend more supporting arguments about Phil's story. Therefore, he reached out to Richard Sauter and Richard Dolan, veterans of this radio program as well, to discuss many of the different realities Phil would discuss while he was on tour. Furthermore, with the help of a friend, Neil Gould, who is head of Exopolitics Hong Kong, he was able to expand this investigation. Darcy rounded up this story with a unique worldview from that side of things, which relates to Phil's goals and how the world is today. And without further ado, I would like to introduce Darcy Weir to Veritas. Hello, Darcy, and welcome to Veritas. How are you?
Hey, Mel. I'm quite well, thank you.
My pleasure to have you on. A few weeks ago, you got in touch with me, Darcy. Apparently, you listened to one of our interviews and you thought that we could do a show about Phil Schneider. And coincidentally, since the beginning of this very radio program, I've always wanted to dedicate a few shows to some people that matter to this program. One of them is obviously Phil Schneider. Another one is William Cooper. But you produce a documentary with a lot of compelling information. We all of us are used to having seen some of Phil Schneider's videos on the web, but they're separate. You were able to compile a lot of this information into one video that created more of an impact than I had before. So I'm glad to have you on so we can discuss Phil's mysterious life and death. But why don't we start, first of all, by you telling us how you became involved in your own independent investigation?
Yeah, well, I guess where it all started was, over pretty much 7 years ago, I was pretty interested in the occult, I was tired of the mainstream media and everything that just gets drilled into your head and sort of dumbs you down, so to speak. And I was following a lot of different things online, and I had always looked for a story that was very unique, that possibly I could create, more of a explanation for. And when I had heard, I had actually been dating a girl at the time who had told me, we were both into this sort of stuff. She had told me, have you ever seen this guy on YouTube? His name's Phil Schneider. He talks about how he got into a altercation when he was working at a secret underground base work site. And the altercation was not with, other people. It was with apparently some form of ET race, and the guy was maimed, and it's really interesting stuff. You should check out this video on YouTube. So I'm like, hell yeah, that sounds really, really interesting. And I start watching and I thought, wow, I mean, what are the implications if this could have actually happened? And that's just where I just started going down the rabbit hole. And I started reaching out to people and did some fact finding. At the time, early on in my research, I spoke to Ken Varden, who is a guy that's he's now quite long retired, but he was heavily involved with putting together some of the early presentations that Phil was involved in at like the American Bigfoot Society and stuff like that back in the early 90s. And Ken Varden had told me, about having dinners with Phil and getting more and more deeper information on the, background of Phil or what had happened to him. And then Ken Varden passed on. He's from, if you look up the American Patriot Network, APN or something like that, he used to have his own website and all this stuff. And it's a very patriotic, and they try to push the envelope with whistleblowing and stuff like that. But it's a little bit outdated now. Anyways, he pushed me on to Cynthia. So Cynthia is Phil's ex-wife. and they had a child together, Marie, who's quite a wonderful person. And when I spoke to Cynthia, she just basically gave me the sort of history on Phil, his life, and a bit about Oscar Schneider. And she provided me with all kinds of documents that Phil had traveled with on his lecture tours, and she provided me with all this data that I put some of it in my documentary. There's so much of it. And as you know, I've sent quite a bit of it to you. So I couldn't include it all into a short documentary, which, it happens pretty quickly. If you watch it, it just kind of goes by pretty quick. It's only about an hour and a half, but,
and you have close to 2 million views by now.
Yeah, it's getting up there. Basically it was a really fun project to work on, and I'm still very interested in all this stuff. And I think Phil is one of those people. I mean, you spoke about William Cooper. I think two similarities between the two of them, right off the bat, is their mysterious deaths. These were controversial figures. They were talking about things that were not in the mainstream public. They challenged the paradigm. They tried to wake people up and get information out there early, when, the world was just, the 90s was not, it wasn't the greatest time for mainstream kind of media that ruled at that time was pretty stupid. I mean, it was pretty dumbed down. And then you had guys like this that were building, you look at the Tea Party, the political party that really it was born out of a grassroots movement. And you look at the way that these people, they saw stuff happening in the American public, sort of political forum, and they were sick and tired of it. And they formed the Tea Party as a group, and they became really powerful, and now they have seats in Congress and everything. But I guess what I'm trying to say is Phil Schneider and William Cooper were both forming these sort of grassroots movements, these large groups of people that were listening to them all over the United States. And these were people that were not necessarily looking for the occult. They were sometimes just average Joes that were, tired of what they were being told by the government or by the mainstream media. And they wanted to find something fresh and find something that maybe connected better with what they may believe to be true, what was really going on around the world. And I think that's the real threat. And back then it was a real threat to the powers that be, because you had a pretty stable system of disinformation, infiltrating the minds of the people and keeping the paradigm nice and stable. But then you had people like Phil Schneider and William Cooper going on tour around the U.S. and just saying, this is bullshit. You're all living a lie. Wake up. And I think that at first for Phil, it wasn't that big, but, he did over 40 lectures before he passed. And he was really, it was just, the momentum was building. I mean, sometimes he did lectures with over 100 people in the room. Sometimes he did lectures with only maybe 20, maybe 15 people in the room. But it was consistent. It was building up. And I believe, he was getting more and more popular, and he was actually getting fresh information just before his demise. I think he was getting stuff that he didn't originally set out to talk about from other insiders. And I think, those that didn't want him to talk had found this out, that he was getting some fresh information. And that's when they put a quick stop to his being, to who he was, and what better way to do that than to just snuff somebody out.
I think that Bill and Phil may no longer be with us, but their work definitely continues to magnify and be validated all the time. But I think also there's a correlation here between what Phil and Bill, and this show is about Phil, but we have to mention Bill too, because what he was doing also was very, very eye-opening to most people. But they were both out there. Let's say that they were in the underground in a way. We didn't have the prevalence of the internet. Only if you had internet by the, 96, 97. Internet pretty much came along in 94. William Cooper had his radio show, and a lot of times he would have to send tapes to people so they could listen and spread out. So no YouTube. Same thing with Phil. People would use their camcorders, make copies, and pass around. But it was very limited in the exposure. Now, when the late 90s came along, I noticed that President Clinton even said to the FBI that William Cooper was the most dangerous man on radio. And I wouldn't doubt that Phil Schneider was up there with him too. So with the advent of the internet, it became more of a threat. And if you notice, Phil died in 96, Cooper died in 2001. But Phil, going back to Phil, he wasn't selling a book, Darcy. He wasn't selling any material. He was simply sharing his truth, correct?
Absolutely. He was, a big portion of what he would do, he would lecture, but he would also bring in evidence on his tour. He would take pieces of metal which he claimed to be off of military craft. He would pass that around the audience. He would bring in pictures which he had taken, I believe, out of his father's file cabinets in his office. And his father was definitely, I think, an ex-Nazi who was brought over under Project Paperclip. And obviously a lot of these Nazis that were brought over under Project Paperclip to the United States or to another country were used as assets. They were used as scientific specialized experts in certain fields that the powers that be wanted to extract more use out of. Otherwise, they would have just been treated like any other Nazi grunt in the war and, probably prosecuted to the fullest extent. But Phil's father was brought over and his family was protected, and his father was kind of like royalty from what it looked like in the Black Project sort of realm, because he worked on really important projects like all of the Abel and Baker bomb tests off the coast of Bikini Atoll, and he worked on the USS Nautilus, which was the first nuclear submarine. Apparently worked on, projects involving the USS Eldridge, which could in fact be the ship that was used for the Philadelphia experiment. But Phil was, I think when his father passed away, he went through his father's files and stuff that was in his office and just found this treasure trove of, information that was hidden to the public. And Phil was a smart cookie. He knew that he had happened upon some very powerful things that people should know about. It shouldn't be just locked away in some filing cabinet in somebody's basement office. And that's when he was going on tour, he was showing that stuff. It's pretty explosive information, even by today's standards, because, people just, I guess part of the purpose of doing my documentary is that people don't realize that, the military industrial complex they took, things that were, already in existence, but they sped up the progress of them. So we had underground, manufacturing technology for, it seems like, thousands of years. If you watch the starting of my documentary, I include some reference information, obviously, showing ancient aliens and stuff like that, because I want people to see that it's all connected. It's part of our history as people on Earth, humans on Earth, that we will tunnel underground to seek shelter and what have you. But it's linked to the military industrial complex, which really ramped up around World War II. They realized the importance and significance of speeding up different types of research to be an instrument of war or defense. And when you're going to do research on exotic technologies, or you're going to experiment on things that can't get out to the public, to the mainstream, to the cattle and sheep that you herd, you don't want to spook the sheep because they won't flock together like you want them to. So you will quite literally push things underground so they're out of sight and out of sound. I guess in my documentary, I just wanted to sort of bring that to light, that it's stuff that's always been around. The military got a hold of it. They, and they still use it today. I mean, you've got the NSA, you've got, their headquarters that goes miles underground, apparently. You've got areas which are very ominous, like Area 51, which you can't even step foot on, and all kinds of areas. Even in Australia, you've got places like Pine Gap, which is a sort of mountain facility, NORAD headquarters. It's not just in the United States. All countries that have interest in keeping things out of sight and out of sound, or want some protection element, will make a facility underground that's heavily fortified. And Phil wanted to out that. He wanted to out a lot of things. And I guess, you could say even the secret space program. Why is that we had, this amazing generation in the 60s when JFK was in power, and we had a race to the stars with the Russians. And then, all of a sudden in the 1970s, we haven't been back to the moon, as a manned mission. That seems pretty strange. Why is that we don't have this why aren't we a civilization that is already populating planets and working together to form a strong relationship with each other rather than against each other? I think part of Phil's presentations, he was trying to prove that, we are a race that's on the way to the stars or has already made its way to the stars, but it's underground. It's basically being carried out, clandestinely by a group that's involved with the military, and it's not for the general public to know. It's basically, it was public knowledge in the 60s and everybody was excited about it, but now they don't want you to be excited about it. They want you to be excited about watching the, pop culture reality TV shows and get worked up about some chick that murders her child and, carry on about stuff that is just mind-numbingly stupid. And shouldn't have any important relevance to our everyday lives because we're more than that. I think mankind has so much more potential. And the powers that be probably know that too, but if we just keep the status quo, then we're good sheep, we won't rock their boat, and they can keep everything going the way it goes.
Not that killing a child by the mother is a stupid thing, but the fact that so many thousands of people die on a daily basis worldwide, and perhaps some of them because of us in the wars that we have, but just focusing on one single trial for weeks about one single person, that is trivial in the scheme of things. But, many people are looking at the picture that I included on the promotion of this interview that we're conducting today, and they see a group of men discussing something. That's the ready room of the USS Eldridge, as Darcy's mentioning. The USS Eldridge was allegedly used for the Philadelphia experiment, and I pointed an arrow to Captain Oscar Schneider, MD, Dr. Schneider as well. But also, I included the name Val Thor just in front of him. He's the only person that's wearing something totally different from the group of gentlemen there. When and how did you find out that this was allegedly Val Thor? And for those people who are listening, you may have heard of the late Dr. Frank Strange's Stranger in the Pentagon. That is the Val Thor. We're used to seeing pictures of the alleged Val Thor that looks totally different than this one. Can you explain?
Yeah, well, apparently this is the picture that Phil went on tour with, and he used it as evidence when he was presenting. He would hand it around. Cynthia still has this at her house in the U.S., somewhere in Oregon. And so I have a copy of it. She shared that with me. And if you watch his lecture, it's pretty much, his lectures are so pixelated. The quality is very low because it's an old VHS that's been a copy of a VHS and was shot on probably 8mm videotape or something like that. So it's not the highest quality, but you can see the picture being presented in his presentations when he's showing it to the crowd, and he's pointing out this character in the front row of apparently the USS Eldridge, some ship or military vessel, and there's quite a few military men sitting behind the character listening to a speaker at the front of the room. And the character in the front, he seems a bit out of place because he's not wearing the same wardrobe as the same uniform as the characters around him. And he's kind of large, like his hand looks pretty large and his head looks pretty big, and he just seems like
his neck. How tall was this man, I wonder?
Yeah, he looks like he's over 6 feet tall at least. Like he's a very huge, proportionate human being, if that. And right behind him, if you look at some of the photos I included in the documentary, Oscar Schneider is sitting right behind him. And apparently on the back of that photo is some notes by Oscar Schneider, the significance of the photo. Because Phil's father would keep this file cabinet full of stuff from all of the black projects or all of the military and government work that he did over the years. And this photo came out of that cabinet, and noted on the back was, "This is Valiant Thor." sitting in the USS Eldridge ready room. And so it's a very interesting photo. I hope that it's true. I hope that it is part of the project that apparently was involved in. And
by the way, I found a more clear picture, and I was able to zoom. And just folks, if you can, look at the man's ear. It looks very different than a regular ear.
Yeah. He looks a bit off. I mean, there's no two ways about it. He doesn't, at first glance, he just looks like another guy. But I think people have been talking about that for a while in the, in the occult, that there's possibly extraterrestrial civilizations that look exactly like us at first glance, but then, you take a closer look or communicate with them and you'll see things are just not the same. And so it's a pretty compelling photo. I thought it was very interesting. Actually, I got it from Lee Lustig. He was the guy he did some of the sound work on the documentary. He did the musical score and stuff. But he's located in Los Angeles. He works in the film and television industry. He's currently actually writing a script. He's doing a screenplay about the Phil Schneider story. And he's trying to find Hollywood, production companies that would possibly get behind the project. But these days, anything that gets into the mainstream movie cinemas is usually something to do with Independence Day type scenarios. So I don't know if it would quite fit with exposing black projects and stuff, but I really do wish him well. And I'm working with him on another documentary right now in a similar vein to the one that we originally released together.
Well, that's the thing that, if somebody has a script to go to the producers, they can seek government help. I mean, Independence Day or any movie that, or Red Dawn that requires their participation, as long as the U.S. military is portrayed as strong, powerful, and the winner, they get involved. But if it's the opposite, and, let's say somebody takes Bill Cooper's book, Behold of a Pale Horse, they would not give a penny. I think the same thing, and I wish your friend good luck, but they don't portray the United States government as a very benevolent entity, if you will. So it's going to be something where perhaps independent producers may have to fund it. That would be a great one, because if Hollywood takes it, I think they're going to change the story, make it science fiction, and completely discredit the real Phil Schneider. But I have a question. I wonder if Oscar Schneider named his son Philip because of his involvement in the Philadelphia experiment. This is just speculation. What do you think?
Could very well be. And Phil apparently told Cynthia that he was involved in some form or another in the Philadelphia experiment, that when he was a baby, he was used as a test subject for some kind of technology that possibly opened, portals to time. And it's purely speculation. It's interesting as hell, but she said that he thought that he was put through one of these, and his year of birth was off by a year because he was sent back. And I don't know. I've got his birth certificate and stuff like that. And he was born on a military base in Bethesda. His father and mother are noted as birth parents on the birth certificate, which is in the documentary. And definitely brings credibility that Phil's father was involved in the military while Phil was being brought into the world. But on another note, with films, that Frank E. Strange's Valiant Thor, Stranger at the Pentagon, is being created as a film.
Yes.
Did you know?
Yes, I do.
And I'm very interested in that project. I hope it comes to fruition. It's a really good story. It has to be. I think it's something that should be told because it could be true, and it could present the idea that what if a government that's in charge of herding the sheep and keeping order and control is presented by an outsider that looks like us, talks like us, but is much more advanced and offers a solution to create harmony and help civilization thrive. And that's through the aid of technology and a new form of economy. What if the government was presented by somebody like that, and they turned down the opportunity because they liked the control and they liked the economy and the society that they had already built, and they wanted things to keep going the way it was because they were scared they would lose control. And it's a very valid scenario. I guarantee it's happened in one form or another. And they probably did ally with possibly somebody who didn't have the best intentions for the world. So, yeah, that's just my take on it. And I think that film could be an amazing sort of presentation on the whole theory.
I remember when I started this radio show, I was referred to the telephone number of Dr. Frank Strange. So I called, and his wife started to cry. And I asked her what was going on. And she said that Frank had just passed away a few days before that. But for those who are listening to us thinking, who is Val Thor? Who's Valiant Thor? Essentially, if I remember correctly, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, this was supposedly somebody who came from Venus and was introduced by our president in exchange for, I don't know what exactly, but this person allegedly had been working at the Pentagon for decades. And this man is allegedly hundreds of years old and never seems to change at all. So if this person that you see on that picture that I have on the website is Valiant Thor, then just imagine how old he can be. There's also other pictures out there. And as you know, the government and intelligence, they probably put other stories out there. So there are other pictures out there of the alleged Val Thor, his brother, and allegedly his sister. But these two look more like Hollywood actors. They just don't seem to be anything different than any Hollywood actor. But another thing that caught my eye, Darcy, in the documents that you sent me, and these are probably some of the copies that Phil retrieved from his late father's cabinet. Take one of them, for example, Department of the Navy. It's a memo that he hand wrote to, I don't know exactly, but Phil always mentioned that he had a rhyolite, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this right, security clearance. And this is exactly, right? So this is exactly what his father had, because he mentioned that rhyolite section of the Navy. Anyway, on one of the memos, and you have a few, he's writing to a Charles. He's conducting, as a medical doctor, he conducted an autopsy on crew member number 9. And he goes into detail and says that he found foreign material, perhaps implants, found in number 9's cerebellum and the nose. And he kind of depicts what it looks like. And also he enlarged in detail. He wrote some script or writing of a known origin. He wanted to see if the person he wrote the memo to could identify the insignia or whatever he found on the gold-tipped, fiber-shaped material that he found. Isn't that interesting too?
I think it is incredibly interesting, and it's all connected, as I said before. I mean, you look at, I believe it's Roger Lear's work, Under the Scalpel.
Dr. Roger Lear, Alien Scalpel, you're right.
Yeah, Roger Lear is a doctor for years now who's been working on abductee cases, one of which would be Stan Romanek, for example. Somebody who comes into his medical practice and they remove foreign objects from their body post apparent abductions. And, I wonder what his documentation looks like, what his post-autopsy notes are on bodies that he's had to extract things from. And apparently in the early days that he was working for NATO, he was pretty much the go-to guy for these types of operations. Just the same as Dr. Weir is, that, there's certain people that seek him out because they hear that he does this type of thing and they're worried about their well-being. They don't know what the hell is going on in their lives. And they go to him to get these types of surgeries done. Well, Oscar was hailed whenever the government had something come up. One of their military men needed an operation to get something removed, apparently. And in this case, this letter discusses, some kind of fiber with a gold tip that has an unknown, either an unknown language on it in microscopic form, because he magnified it quite intensively in order to extract that information and create the illustration on his paper. So this is a super small, this is basically a transistor, as Cynthia says in the documentary. It was basically something that somebody else put in a body to possibly track them or see, what was going on. I think it's very relevant to the whole abduction phenomenon that's going on around the world. So to think that the government is working with certain doctors to extract this information and research it themselves does not surprise me. And the fact that they would have been doing it as early as the 1950s doesn't surprise me at all. But of course, to the mainstream, it seems incredibly loony and just challenges the norm, challenges celebrity reality TV and all the shit that people invest their time in these days.
Well, it's bread and circus. That's exactly my opinion. We think that during Roman times, the population was trying to revolt, and the Caesar gave them bread and circus. So we have bread and circus right now. We have sports, we have reality TV, and we have fast food to keep us quote unquote healthy. But, some of the other documents I'm seeing here, Darcy, one of them is written to General Nathan Twining. Another one to Admiral Roscoe Hillencutter. These are names that we discuss all the time, and they're all dated early 1950s. In this one, let me just read something quick. He says, as of 0600, 21 April 1953, J. Edgar Hoover now requests that all associated personnel be given prior and restrictive psychological testing conducted by the Navy Psychological Unit of Quantico, Virginia. He's referring to the personnel inside the Eldridge. What do you think was happening here?
Well, it sounds like if you kind of read the succession of letters and stuff, it seems like you can piece together the story that they've carried out the test. They've carried out the project to the extent that they've possibly had success with some form or another on the USS Eldridge in regards to the technology that it was supposed to do, which is make it invisible. But I think in the lore and the story of the USS Eldridge and the Philadelphia experiment, people will note that it may have teleported instead and showed up in a totally different location somewhere else in the world. So if that type of event took place and there was live crew members on the USS Eldridge at the time, and the U.S. Army has found this vessel, well, they found the crew members as well, and they probably want to not only debrief the crew members and find out where the hell they went and what happened, but for those that are coming back from this journey, some of them you may want to investigate their the well-being of their human form, and that requires some form of autopsy or medical examination. So with one of the letters, I think what supposedly happened was it was a cadaver. At the point the officer had passed away, and they had found all these foreign objects in his body. And then in the other letter, it was a memo to get psych evaluations on the soldiers immediately, to find out if they were, capable to still stay in service. And furthermore, if they were able to describe what had happened to them, and what better forum to discuss that than by a military psychologist. Because if you have a military psychologist doing this debriefing, well, if he says something crazy, you can just call him crazy and throw him in a loony bin, even though what he's saying actually may have happened. And then if he says something that may be dangerous and important, well, you can extract that and you can give it on to the higher ups of the military.
And I keep reading all this stuff while you're talking, and here's another memo that he wrote to EU Condon. And for those who don't know, Edward Condon was a distinguished American nuclear physicist, a pioneer in quantum mechanics, and a participant in the development of radar and nuclear weapons during World War II as part of the Manhattan Project. He wrote a memo to him, quoting Hoover and mentioning that this was of 1A prime directive. I don't know what that really means, but it seems important. And also he's mentioning and congratulating Condon for his participation in the project at his visit in Colorado at Boulder. And also he mentions concern of Nikola Tesla's spatial analyzer. And this is strange because we hear of this almost as if this technology was sequestered from Tesla. And we've heard this before, that Nikola Tesla's spatial analyzer was related to the Manhattan Project. Have you looked into this at all?
Well, I mean, yeah, Condon would, in a nutshell, you could describe him as the anti-Stan Friedman. He was a Stan Friedman that went wrong, and instead of having the best intentions for the general public, he wanted people to be in the dark and stupid about everything involving even UFOs or, the cosmic truth, space. So he went on tour in the U.S. As a sort of a debunker to all these sort of exotic theories about what's going on the planet and out there in the universe. But he was employed by the military. So Stan Friedman, when I say anti-Stan Friedman, he was also a scientist involved with nuclear and physics to some degree, and he's been championing the idea that we have been visited on the planet by different parties or races in the cosmos, and he's a good man that champions those sort of ideas, whereas this man is a notorious, I'd say infamous in our field, debunker. He's quite a scoundrel, and he was part of the military, so he was well informed about possibly what was going on behind closed doors, and spatial analyzer. So what does that have to do with anything? Nikola Tesla apparently had a great deal with helping carry out that whole project. He was apparently the brains behind the physics and the technology that was to come to pass in order for the whole thing to even work, for the Philadelphia experiment. And so apparently the spatial analyzer was a contraption or a device that helped track space-time and put objects into hide them by hiding them from space-time, because they are able to. I'm not really able to fully explain what it would do, but other people who've written about the Philadelphia experiment have described this as a possible device that was used by Nikola Tesla or invented by Nikola Tesla for the project. So, it's interesting that it's even quoted in there, along with Condon, who's somebody who would always be out there in the public forum, shutting down whistleblowing or any ideas that would challenge the paradigm or the standard mass conception of reality.
Also, I keep reading these memos, and I don't mean to deviate from Phil's story, but I think it's important to note Phil's father's involvement with U.S. Navy intelligence. Here's another one, and I'm looking on the web here. This one is actually not from the 50s. This is prior to World War II ending. This memo is dated December 12th, 1944, and is referring to another U.S. vessel, the Furuseth or Farnseth, I'm not sure exactly. And he says, in consideration of the latest facts, in considering the fact of the USS Furuseth, all ships' personnel, I don't know what happened to this ship, but all ships' personnel and material must be quarantined absolute until further notice. No exceptions. On-site naval inspection is ordered forthwith. And it says this is written to Admiral Roscoe Hillencutter, U.S. Navy. Consider these areas and all events of nature above secret. Project Blue Sky. What do you know about Project Blue Sky?
I don't know enough, but the way I read that letter is it's all linked to the same sort of memos that are going out about the USS Eldridge, and the Farnseth may be just another code name to try and break up any paper trail that may be followed by people like you and I. So if we pick up one letter that says Eldridge or says, Farnseth, then we'll think, oh, these are two different ships. But really, to those that are inside, they're part of the military-industrial complex. They're in the know, so to speak. They would be able to discern what this letter is actually pertaining to. And if, in fact, they're saying we have to quarantine all objects, all property and material that come from the Farnseth, as well as those occupants that came back from their journey, you can kind of discern, well, that's kind of right there saying that mission accomplished, but we got to get a lid on things and make sure things don't get out to the public. So guys, take this very seriously and keep the lid shut.
Definitely. And let's take a moment to discuss the alleged, and folks, please consider that I keep using the word alleged because, people who listen to us might say, do you have 100% proof? And I don't. But it's so compelling that I wanted to bring Darcy to continue and explain more. But 1979, the Dulce facility, can you please explain and recount again what Phil used to to retell the story of how he was called. He was a geologist, and he was involved in going down to the Dulce base to put a stop to something. Can you elaborate?
Yeah. So when on tour, Phil would always, one of his main topics he would discuss was the fact that the U.S. government is heavily involved in building these underground bases to protect their research and their scientific interests and keep them underground. So in Dulce, New Mexico, or Dulce, he was involved in, he was a part of the structural engineering team. I think he was more involved in the geology, the rock formations that are part of that landmass there. And he would analyze the rock formations and help people that were involved in deflagrating, which is the process of melting out or exploding rock formations. And furthermore, if they couldn't do that, then using some kind of boring technology to chew through the formations. And if you have a geologist part of your team, they're able to basically wrap the head around the group or sort of explain to the group what the next sort of formation they're going through so that their task can be handled pretty well. So apparently in this process, he was, they hit a wall, or they hit a roadblock, they hit an obstacle that was not allowing them to proceed with their tunneling. And that required an individual to actually go down into the excavated hole that they had created so far, and find out what was creating this obstacle or hindering their work from progressing. And in doing so, he, first of all, in my documentary, I just want to clear the air. I had an illustration artist. He created some graphics to sort of present the idea in graphical form at the starting of my documentary. Phil said he was in a space suit-like environment. I think a lot of people have seen the graphical images and said, oh, if he's in a spacesuit, how can he smell anything? How can he really be able to explain things the way he has and the way the events unfolded? Well, he said space-like, and the illustration artist put an actual spacesuit on him in the scenario, so it's not exactly accurate, but spacesuit-like means that it wasn't exactly a spacesuit, but it was something that kept him protected, okay? So he gets lowered down into this hole quite far down, and as he gets further down, he starts to smell an aroma that's quite foul. People that even wear industrial waste masks and other types of chemical blockers will even say that they can smell a fragrance coming through the thickest and most important air filters that you can wear on your face. Sometimes you just can't get rid of a smell. But anyways, he gets lowered in this basket into this area, and apparently he encounters a extraterrestrial entity, which he probably didn't identify as that at the time. He just saw it as something humanoid and not very, welcoming. I think Cynthia, when she explained the story to me, something he would say off the record was that it's part of what the smell was down there was rotten decay. As you go deep in the earth, you're going to smell like different things like methanes and stuff coming up naturally from the earth, from fossils and fossil fuels that go deeper down. But in this area where the entities were, apparently, it was very foul because apparently there was human bodies down there. And the human bodies were cadavers. They were dead. And Phil had seen this and was startled, and seeing this sort of thing doesn't make you think, well, I'm going to reach out my hand to welcome this committee. I'm probably going to defend myself. So that's what apparently he did. He had a gun and he shot these beings. But after that, there was an exchange of fire. So he received some mutilation from this event and carried it throughout his life after that. He was missing quite a few fingers. He had his body just basically split open from his chest down to his abdomen in this event.
Describe the weapon that was allegedly used by the Grey.
Well, I can't say what the weapon was, but allegedly something that fired an electrical force or just an energy, not like shooting a piece of metal like we do, which is basically an extension of the sword or an arrow, right? We just put gunpowder behind it. So it's a pretty primitive weapon. But whatever was shot back at him was an energy form and just kind of split him open. But
by the way, even during the autopsy, cauterized, exactly. Even during the autopsy, and we'll talk about this later, the autopsy of Phil's body, the person who conducted the autopsy mentioned that it was that the area of the chest was burnt. So, that's probably from that incident.
Quite possibly. I mean, it was burnt. Yeah. There's a lot of things that were discussed in his autopsy, which you have all the documentation, so you can see for yourself in the autopsy surrounding his death. The circumstances just don't add up as a suicide, but it also alludes to the fact that his body went through quite some trauma in his existence when he was living.
Absolutely, but let's not go there yet. I want to go in chronological order. In 1979, he survived this incident, and how many Green Berets were sent there? I remember this by Bill mentioning it. Dozens of Green Berets were sent there, and they pretty much all died, right?
Yeah, I mean, people have been talking about it, for years, saying that something like 70 people passed in the event, military and researchers alike. So there was quite the altercation. I think what happened was maybe Phil and his team triggered an event that led to an all-out battle of some form or another. And hey, is it possible? I think it's very possible. Did it go down exactly the way that Phil told us? Maybe not. Maybe that's his version of things. And maybe the 90s was an era where people liked to hear heroic stories. They liked to be caught up in the idea of, a man defending himself and being, like Arnold Schwarzenegger fighting the Predator and stuff like that, right? I don't know if it went down that way. I mean, Anthony Sanchez, who wrote UFO Highway, parts of the information that come out in his book, they line up with what Cynthia was telling me. I mean, I asked Cynthia, has Phil ever been shot? Like, when he said he was shot on tour, shot at least, did you ever remember him being wounded or anything? She said, yeah, well, one night Phil came back to the house and, I heard a knock at the door and it's late at night.
By the way, I don't mean to stop you, but we have to take our one and only intermission, and we'll take this on the way back. This is such a fascinating story, and there were plenty of attempts toward Phil's life. And when he died, he had multiple health conditions. But one thing I do remember during his lectures, he said, "I will never commit suicide. I'm a very religious person. If I'm ever found that I committed suicide, I did not." And he said that again and again. But we'll discuss more of this when we come back. How can people watch your documentary? I have it linked on our website so they can watch it. But is there anything else you would like to do to promote your work and your upcoming documentary?
Yeah, well, it's absolutely free. People can just hop on YouTube and search The Underground, and you'll see the title of The Underground, which is a story about Phil Schneider and possibly a hidden reality that is going on even today. The new documentary that I'm working on is called Beyond the Spectrum, out here in Australia. As people know, all of this sort of occult information is not just from the United States. It's from all walks of life on Earth. It's from Australia. It's from Africa. It's from China. You know, you've got airports being shut down in China in 2011 from apparent UFOs blocking the runway, etc. But Beyond the Spectrum, the documentary is going to be about a lot of stuff on that, but it's also going to be on human perception, the visual spectrum, and how people perceive information and how the human eye can only see certain things that are going on around us. So I guess that's all I can say for now, and I look forward to publishing that in the near future and getting that out to the public. Absolutely. And one of the persons that we discussed on this show, our friend Dr. Richard Sauter, and I'm not sure if I should mention this publicly, but he's not in the United States currently, but he suffered an extensive beating in the hands of I don't know who. He's still recovering. Hopefully once he feels comfortable to come back and tell us more of the story, he'll return to Veritas to let us know. But I've received a lot of emails from people asking me if I know how Dr. Richard Sauter is, and he's recovering from this incident. Yeah, when I started interviewing him for this documentary, he was in South America at the time, and he had told me about all the things that he was doing down there. So I guess we can talk about that when you come back. But yeah, it's startling that he's been beaten, and yeah, my hope goes out to him. I hope he's recovering and he has quick Godspeed on his recovery. Certainly. Well, folks, don't go anywhere. I'm here with Darcy Weir discussing the mysterious life and death of Philip Schneider. This is Mel Fabregas, and you are listening to Veritas. Don't go anywhere. Thank you for listening to the first segment of this very important interview. To listen to the rest, go to veritasradio.com and subscribe. You will receive your login immediately. We'll take a short intermission, listen to some music, and we'll be right back. Enjoy.